We moved into my grandparents' old house in the country when I was 9. My 2 younger siblings and our parents had come along. It was an isolated, eerie place, especially for someone like me who grew up in the city. There was another house nearby, but it looked old, patched together and just wrong. Something about it never set right with me. It was until we'd been living there for months that I learned there were elderly sisters who lived there. They had 3 kids, though they were rarely ever seen. Our house felt broken. I don't mean structurally, though it was falling apart in that way too. It just felt like there was a heaviness in the air. The best way I could describe it was that it was like walking through cotton balls. It was hard to explain to my mom. And she would just tell me I was being dramatic and to stop making up stories. But even she had trouble living there. My dad eventually fixed up the garage and we moved in. We also got cable and high-speed internet, so at least we weren't completely out in the sticks. My mom got a job working for the local newspaper, got picked on for being new and for having red hair, so I spent most of my time alone in my room or outside exploring the woods behind our property. Next door was where those 3 kids lived. The eldest son, Liam, was the creepiest of them all. He was maybe 12 or 13. One day I was playing by the pool, and he came over while I was in there. I was maybe 9 or 10 at the time. He stood at the edge and dangled his toes in the water, but mostly he just watched me. I asked him what he was doing, and he told me to get out of his pool. I told him it was my mom's pool, and he said, "No, it's mine now." And he started making a gurgling noise like a snake. Then he took off, and I went inside to tell my mom. She just shook her head and told me to stay away from that kid. One time I was getting stuff out of our fridge and Liam came in. He asked if he could have my apple. When I turned around, he was reaching for it, and I swatted his hand away. He looked at me and smiled. Then he grabbed some apples and ran to his house. I told my mom he stole my fruit, and she just told me to leave it alone. He loved anime, and he would spend hours watching it on our cable. One time he came up to me while I was watching TV and said, "Hey, do you like anime?" I said yes, and he responded, "Me too. I like to chase you around the yard with my shears and then cut your hair off." He kept coming closer and closer to me, and I started to get scared. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. Then he lunged at me and I woke up in my bed. The twins were always around. They were about 8 or 9 and looked a few years younger than me. They didn't speak much, but when they did, their voices sounded like nails on a chalkboard. They were always dirty and flinching, and they seemed hungry a lot of the time. But Liam was definitely the worst of them. There was something seriously wrong with him. It was bad enough that my mom told us not to go over there, but there was also something in the way he looked at us that made me afraid. Even though I knew nothing bad would happen to me, I still felt like there was something wrong next door. There was something wrong inside that house. One day I heard screaming from next door. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but it sounded like my mom. I ran to the window and saw her talking to someone. She was standing in the yard and it looked like she was pointing at something. I've mentioned before that the main road near our house was really long and there wasn't another house in sight. I wondered who she could be talking to. But then she turned around and I realized it was the woman who lived next door. She was maybe 45 or 50 and dressed in a flower print dress and white socks. Her hair was pulled back and she wore thick glasses. She turned back to my mom and continued talking. I don't know why, but I felt the need to hide. I crawled on my hands and knees and peeked out from behind the curtains. My mom must have noticed because she came to my door and asked me what I was doing. I lied and told her I was looking for a bug to put in my bug collection. She gave me a strange look, but left to go back outside. A few minutes later, she called me outside. She was holding a glass jar with a lid and asked me to take a look. Inside was a large beetle with black and orange wings. It looked beautiful. I remember thinking how vibrant and alive it seemed. She let out a breath and said, "Sometimes you just need to get away from it all, you know? I feel like I'm going crazy here." She paused. "Say, have you ever seen a third eye on an insect?" "I think you have one, you know." She handed me the jar. "You have a third eye?" She stared at me for a moment and I felt uncomfortable. "Hey." Then she smiled and said, "I'll see you later." She walked back to her house and my mom turned to me. "What did she say to you?" "Nothing," I replied. My mom shook her head and went back inside. Didn't tell her what the woman said about the third eye, because I didn't think she'd believe me, so I went inside too. And that is where we will end this part. If you want to hear the rest of the story, please let me know. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.